introductory demo. So this is an introductory of for the people who are actually new today, and there will be 3 demos. After the 3 demos, the demos will not be anymore exist. But anyways, let us start with this demo today. So as I told you, I mean, our agenda is really to understand what exactly the cloud computing and how really this Microsoft Azure helps lots of companies or lots of projects to really maintain infrastructure as a code, platform as a code, and also software as a service. So now let me just quickly share my screen so that I can just quickly share my PPT. I would like to start with a real-time use case. As you can see, I hope you can see my screen. And this, the current presentation is all about a use case really works in the real time. So as you know that you guys already know that we have this Netflix as one of the famous streaming service that everybody basically subscribes this Netflix service, and then they watch lots of TV shows and movies and everything, right? So I will take this as an example to really make you understand how this is really suitable when it comes to the cloud computing, and then make you understand topic by topic. So as you can see in this particular PPT, as I showed you, I mean, this is basically called on-premises infrastructure. I don't know whether you actually know this technical term on-premises infrastructure or not, but I try to actually go from the very basic scratch level. So let me just quickly explain maybe on the whiteboard. So for example, let me take a company. Okay, so I will take a company called X company. And when I basically take a company, what I have lots of employees, right? I have lots of employees. And for them to work, really what they need really an infrastructure to be in place. So what exactly the infrastructure? Each employee should basically use maybe a laptop or whatever the office workstation and everything, right? And then each laptop or whatever they are actually operating in a company, they all basically connected through a network, right? So it means that whenever somebody is basically working in a company, what they need to have required resources such as laptops and so on, and all those computing resources are actually provided by the company. And these computing resources such as the laptop and workstations and everything, they're actually maintained by, again, few employees. They are actually called IT department. So IT department is the department who actually supports this whole infrastructure. So maintaining these systems, upgrading the systems, connecting them together. So this is all actually taken care by the company people from different departments. So you might ask me why I'm actually talking about this. I'm talking about this because I want to make you understand what is on-premises infrastructure. If you can see, this is an X company where you have different kind of computing resources and they're all actually connected via network. This you can actually call it as on-premises infrastructure, because this is located in a premises, so everybody uses it. So if in a company, all the computing resources are located, they are actually located in premises and they are actually connected together to really have, the networking solutions and everything in place. So this is something called on-premises environment, because you have everything available in your company. Now, what I would like to start with, I would like to start with a simple use case. So let's say you guys really want to start your own business, which is also called Netflix, right? You want to start your business. When you want to start your business, and what this Netflix will do, Netflix will actually give you a flexibility of watching the movies, TV shows, or whatever you really have, right? And let's say there are really many users available to watch movies on Netflix, okay, across the globe. Across the globe, there are really many users available. So for a Netflix application, in order to work, let's say there are 50,000 of users today. And tomorrow, Netflix has become really popular and the number of users are really increased across the globe. It means tomorrow, how many users are actually increased, and there are 50 more thousand of users are increased. So it means that as per the popularity of a particular service, the number of users accessing the applications are actually getting increased day by day. So when I say this Netflix, what exactly it means? It means that there are really lots of computing resources are actually working. So it means if the number of users are getting increased, what will happen? You really need to increase the number of computing resources, right? So let's say today there are 1 lakh of users are actually available. So what I did, I increased the number of resources, the computing resources, in order to support all the users to run, to watch the TV shows or whatever the streaming movies. And tomorrow, what has happened? Tomorrow again, there would be 20 more thousand users are actually coming in. There are 20,000 more users are actually coming in. Then how do you handle it? So let's say you have handled well. So what you did, you have increased few more. You have increased few more computing resources in order to support even new users, right? And now, if you can look at here, I was actually talking about this on-premises infrastructure. So what exactly, again, this on-premises, as I told you, this is located in on-premises, right? So now, let's say this in Netflix, this Netflix has almost 75,000 of users now. So for these 75,000 users, in order to support all these users, let's say I need to have minimum of 10,000 missions actually supporting this application, 10,000 virtual missions. Okay, so let's say this is on premises now. This is on premises. When you are basically having 10,000 of virtual missions, you are maintaining all these 10,000 virtual machines on your premises by maintaining a department, an IT department. So now let's say tomorrow again, there would be more 20,000 users. Then what you do? Again, you will add, let's say 2,000 more virtual machines in your company. But is it really feasible for you? I mean, all of a sudden, after a month, what has happened? Netflix has actually gone down and all the users who subscribed, they are lost. So now again, what has happened? Almost 30,000 of the users are actually lost to the Netflix. Now, how many are basically available? Only 95 and 65,000 available. But what you did, you have purchased this many of the virtual machines in order to support your Netflix and in order to support your users. But since you have lost your users, then what has happened here? The problem is you have purchased this many of the resources, but they are lost. You know that those virtual machines are actually of no use. So then what kind of solution you really need in this kind of scenarios? So this is a problem of the on-premises infrastructure that you really want to have. When you want to implement your Netflix streaming application, then you need to purchase all the resources that are required for the application to support and also the customers to support to stream your movies. But the problem is, if you lost your business, then you will lose even the resources that you bought. Okay, this is a big problem of the on-premises infrastructure whenever you actually maintain. But now, how do you really, find a better solution really to achieve, you should not lose, and also you should be flexible whenever you need to decrease the number of resources that you use or increase the number of resources that you use. So how do you really find a better solution for these kind of, problems? By using the cloud services. So that is the reason why in the first slide, I have basically mentioned that. So on-premises infrastructure, if your application is growing bigger, it means if your application is becoming popular and there would be more customers are actually accessing up your application. And when there are lots of users are actually accessing your application, you need to maintain the number of resources also to support those many of the customers. But all of a sudden you have lost your business. When you lost your business, whatever the resources that you have purchased, let's say you have purchased almost 10,000 of virtual machines. You have purchased 10,000 of virtual machines, then you lost your business. Then where do you throw all these resources? So this is a big problem of the on-premises infrastructure. And also, if you can look at here, so you also have to maintain the security, right? So you have lots of resources, lots of servers in order to support your application, Netflix application. But if you have all these resources in your company and maintaining by you only have to take care of the security. If any attacks come to your servers, if any attacks come to your application, who will really be responsible? And you are the person who will be responsible. So this is also one of the problems. And also the high availability. It means that, for example, let's say your company, you are maintaining your Netflix, Netflix servers. You are maintaining almost your Netflix servers, 10,000 of virtual machines in order to support your application. So let's say that location is somewhere, in Mumbai, where you placed all these virtual machines. You have basically placed all these virtual machines to support your Netflix application in a location called Mumbai. All of a sudden, there is a earthquake in Mumbai. Then what has happened? Whatever the virtual machines you have located in Mumbai location, and all are actually gone. Then if you are actually lost due to this earthquake, then your application also is in trouble. So it means the customers cannot really access your application. So this is also one of the problems. It means that what exactly I would say, this is basically availability of your application. When you basically maintain the resources in your premise, in your location, if something happens in that particular location, what will happen? You will lose your business and your application will go down, and the customers will not be able to access your application. Due to that, you may lose your business also. that is also a big problem. So that is actually called as high availability. And then the scalability. So when I basically talk about this, the scalability. So let's say that Netflix, the customers who are actually subscribing Netflix application, they're watching movies in the midnight. Let's say, for example, from 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. in the midnight. Then during the duration, what you have to do, you have to increase your servers in order to support number of users logged in and watching your movies. So it means what exactly it means. So you also should be flexible for the customers whenever they are trying to watch your movies through Netflix. You should really support those users based on even the traffic that you have. Let's say from 10 a.m. to 1 a.m., 10 p.m. to 1 a.m., you have a lot of traffic coming from the different customers who are watching your movies on Netflix. Then you should actually support them by increasing your servers in order to support your customers. Okay, but in other timings, for example, from again 1 a.m. to morning 6 a.m., you don't really need to support, let's say, 10,000 users. So nearly 10,000 users are actually watching your Netflix from 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. But other than those duration, the users are pretty much less. Only, let's say, 5,000 users are actually watching in other duration timings. So you also should be flexible to really support your customers who really subscribe your application to. So that is basically called a scalability. It means you should know when is your traffic is actually increasing. Based on the traffic is getting increased during a particular time, you should support your customers to really avoid any problems coming to your application. Then in the offline times, the users who are not really watching your Netflix, then you do not need to have those many resources when you have really a big traffic for your application. So this is also one thing you have to look at. So if you really have to solve all these problems, and also there is one more problem here. If you can look at here, disaster recovery. So what exactly this disaster recovery? For example, let's say you have this many of the virtual machines running in order to support your Netflix application. All of a sudden, what happened? So this virtual machine is not really working. This virtual machine is also not really working. This virtual machine is also not really working. Then do you have any solution if you maintain yourself? So you only have to figure it out how you can really support in these kind of scenarios. So the primary goal of the customer, that he should not be interrupted. For example, let's say I'm a customer to the Netflix. What I think all the time, whenever I basically stream my movies, the Netflix should really work well. If I see any latency, if I see any kind of low performance, then I will lose interest in subscribing this Netflix channel. Then what I do, I basically go to another streaming platform where I can get the best service. So the reason that I was actually talking about this, it is because that what exactly the problems when you really have to maintain an application through which you actually support lots of users who are actually connecting to your application. So that is the reason why what I mentioned all these points here. So when you basically build your own Netflix application by supporting your virtual machine servers and everything, you have to maintain yourself the security. You have to, maintain the availability of your application. There should not be any problem. If at all there is a problem in particular location, you should really have some strategy to support who are actually streaming your services. And also you should be supporting your customers during, let's say, a particular timing period. As I told you, let's say there is a huge traffic from 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. Then you should be supporting your application to avoid any interruptions for your services. And the disaster recovery, whenever something is lost in your resources, in your servers, then you really have to think about how you can find a solution, how you can really find a strategy to avoid these problems. If you really can't, if you really can't achieve all these topics, then you're lost. You should be making sure that you should have proper security and also proper high availability for your application, and the scalability, and also the disaster recovery. If something goes wrong, and you should have some strategy to really bring your application back. So this is all basically the problems when you are actually maintaining and building your own infrastructure to support your application. This is the reason why I mentioned that this is on-premises infrastructure. It means you have built this infrastructure, and you are supporting the security, you are supporting the high availability, you are supporting the scalability, you are supporting the disaster recovery, and you are supporting your application to make sure there is no any problem with respect to the application who are really accessing your application. So this is basically on-premises infrastructure. What is the problem of this way of maintaining? The problem is you have to purchase the lots of resources. It means you have to invest lots of money. And you should also invest lots of money to recruit the people who can support this infrastructure. And many teams should be working in order to support your application, and so on. So this is all really you have to maintain for yourself. But now let me just give you a solution. So whatever the problems that I talked here, and I try to find a solution for this particular problem which I actually told you now. So that is actually called on-cloud infrastructure. The same example. So now what I was actually talking about, the Netflix, the Netflix is basically taking on-cloud infrastructure. So you might be wondering, what is on-cloud infrastructure? So as I told you, here you can see that in order to support this Netflix application, I have got lots of VMs, virtual machine servers, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and count it. Let's say I have 10,000 of virtual machine servers I need in order to support my Netflix. But this time, I don't want to really purchase my virtual machine servers. What I do it, I simply rent. I simply take a rent from a particular provider. That the provider is actually called as cloud provider. So we will understand what exactly the cloud computing and everything, but I just try to give you some example. So as I told you, now what I'm taking, I am basically taking the resources which are required in order to support my application from a particular cloud provider. I'm not talking about which provider and so on. I have taken all these resources as renting based. And also now the problem is, since I've taken these resources from the cloud provider, I do not really, pay. I do not need to maintain for myself. What I do, I simply take a rent from the cloud provider and I make use all these resources whenever I need. And also you can see the security part, and who will basically take care of the security? Of course, cloud, whoever the provider who is actually providing the resources for you, then they will partially take care of the security. So it means if there are any attacks actually coming on your application, then initially they will be scanning all the requests are actually coming to your application, if you use a cloud provider for your resources. And then again, I talked about this high availability. It means, let's say your application has got lots of users now. So now what you do, you again increase your availability by taking into different locations. So what exactly it means? For example, let me just give you some example. So when I basically talk about this high availability, so when I talk about this high availability, so if it is on premises, what I told you, so I told you that you have lots of VM servers located in where you have that they're located in Mumbai. If something actually goes wrong in that particular location, what is really happening? So your virtual machine all are actually gone. But in this case, do you have high availability? You don't have high availability. So it means there is no high availability, because if something goes wrong in this particular location, your VM servers or whatever the resources you have, everything is gone. So due to that, you cannot really achieve this high availability. But as I told you, now what I did, I took the resources from the cloud provider. How do I take it? Let's say I will take few resources from Mumbai, and then I will take few resources from Hyderabad. I will take some few resources in Bangalore, and I will take few resources from Delhi. And then in each location, I really have, let's say here I have 2000 VM servers, and here also 2K VM servers and 2K. Let's say something has gone wrong in here. Then still my application is running on other VMs in other locations. So if something goes wrong in particular location, still my application has the servers running in different locations, through which I can achieve this high availability. This is only possible when you really, take the resources from the cloud providers. So if you really want to achieve the same thing, for example, let's say being an on-premises server. So let's say you also have office in Mumbai. Yeah. And you also have office in Hyderabad. You also have office in Delhi. And you also want to achieve the same way, that you want to keep, let's say, in each location, you want to keep maybe 2000 of servers in each location. If something goes wrong, of course, you have it, right? You have it, right? But still, in order to maintain these resources, you need, the people who are ready to really look at the maintenance of the whole infrastructure, what you have. So let's say if you don't need, if you don't need this kind of hassle, then what you do is you simply rely on the cloud providers who can actually give you this flexibility. So that is again one of the points when it comes to this on cloud infrastructure. So we will basically talk about these cloud providers and cloud computing and everything. And then, as I told you, the scalability. So as I told you, the scalability comes, let's say, as I've given an example, you have lots of users are actually connecting from 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. Then you can scale during the time period based on, the time duration, what you have. So that can be achieved by using your cloud infrastructure. So if you have to achieve the same thing on premises, you really have to maintain, lots of strategies in order to support this kind of flexibility for the customers. But with the cloud infrastructure, this is something very piece of cake. With some simple conditions, you can actually achieve this kind of, scaling when it comes to any kind of application, especially, for example, here in this case, it is Netflix. And then the same way, disaster recovery. So the cloud providers, basically, they are pretty much good at this disaster recovery. For example, if something basically goes wrong with this VM, then immediately there will be one more VM ready to take over the responsibility of this, default, the faulty VM. So this you actually can achieve with few clicks of this cloud computing. So look at all these kind of features, what we really have. Look at all these kind of benefits, what we really have. If you really have an infrastructure in your on-premises, you have to maintain everything. You have to really, take all the kind of strategies and everything to really maintain that. But if you really take the services from the cloud, if your infrastructure is basically built from the cloud, then you can achieve whatever the benefits that I told you in simple clicks. So these are pretty much like what exactly the problem with the on-premises infrastructure and cloud infrastructure. So now let me just go to the next slide. So you can see basically I listed here the consumption model. So I said capital expenditure and operational expenditure. So what exactly the consumption model? So this is something that we have to understand before we really get into this Azure cloud computing. So a consumption model is nothing but how a user basically wants to use it. So it means, for example, let's say you want to really start a company. Okay, you want to really start a company. So you want to start up a company. What you do, you take a building, you purchase a building, and then you purchase all the necessary resources, and you also recruit the people who actually maintain all the infrastructure and the resources, and you basically invest lots of money into this. You don't know whether your business is actually going to be successful or going to be lost, right? So it means, let's say you have invested almost like 20 million into this. Okay, but let's say you again want to start up a company, but this time you don't want to invest. He's a intelligent guy. So what he wants to do, he does not want to invest the money to purchase a building, to really purchase the resources, to recruit the people and so on. What he will do, he will simply take a leasing. So he will simply take the rent of a building, and he will simply take the rent of the resources of the computers or whatever. He will take some temporary resources, temporary employees who actually can manage. If the business does not work, then he will just go offline. I mean, he does not need all these resources. So the way that you are investing your money to really establish a company or whatever you want to do, this is basically called capital expenditure. It means that you are investing your capital to really start your company, but you don't know whether your company will be basically lost or profitable. If your company is lost, then you will basically lose all whatever the investment that we have put in. But here, let's say if your company is lost, there is no problem. You can just cancel your contract for your rent, and then that's it. At least you can reduce your investment money that you have put in, right? This model is basically called operational expenditure. This is called OPEX and CAPEX. In simple terms, what is this? This is CAPEX, capital expenditure. So it means you invest lots of money to really establish a company or whatever you want to start. But with this model, operational expenditure, you simply take the rent of the resources and make use it if that works, and that works. Otherwise, you will just cancel your contract and then you are at least fine with it. So now the reason that why I was actually talking about this consumption model, because the cloud computing, the cloud resources basically work in operational expenditure model. So it means what exactly the cloud computing now here. So let me define. The cloud computing is basically a kind of computing resources which you can take it for rent, and pay only when you use it. If you don't use it, then don't pay anything. So this is pretty much flexible, right? So that is the reason why cloud computing is basically kind of pay as you go. It means you pay what you use. If you don't use, then don't pay. So that model is basically called operational expenditure. Operational expenditure is the example for this operational expenditure is cloud computing, which is also called Azure cloud. There are other clouds as well. You take the services and then make use them. If you don't want, then just don't use it and don't pay it. This is pretty much that how this model really works. Now, of course, this consumption model basically has the benefits, which I told you. I mean, if you don't use and don't pay and all these things, of course, these are also available, information if you really want to know. And then let's basically go to, again, the benefits of the cloud computing. So as I told you, so while if you're using the services from the cloud, you basically have the high availability, as I told you. You also have the scalability, as I've told you. But we also have this horizontal scaling and vertical scaling. I will talk about this horizontal scaling and vertical scaling on hands. So we will have the real practice that what exactly the horizontal scaling and vertical scaling. So I will talk about that in practical. And the reliability. So when it comes to the reliability is nothing but, let's say you have your application running in your on-premises. You have your applications running on your on-premises. Can you predict the number of users tomorrow? How many will be added? Let's say today we have almost like 1 lakh users. Can you predict tomorrow that there will be, let's say, 10,000 users more coming in? You can't predict it, right? For example, let's say you have predicted, the number of users. Then you have to increase the capacity of the resources that you have. But is that going to be really your prediction? Your prediction is going to be really successful? In order to implement the prediction, what kind of strategy that again you have to implement? This is all you who has to do it. But if you use the cloud services, the prediction, everything will be taken care by the cloud. It means that, so cloud is basically giving you the flexibility that what kind of performance that your application is giving. Is it your application is slow or not? Is it really good? And the number of users who are actually accessing, the number of who are not really accessing, and what is the issue and everything. There is already a reliability. There is already a service which is available in place in the cloud services. You can basically use those services as well. So this is something that reliability is all about. And the cost. So as I told you, you only pay what you use. And the security, of course, the security is already in place. So the cloud provider will basically take care of the security as well. Of course, you also have to take care of the security a bit, but we will talk about that security part later. Now the management, it means that if you, let's say you want to establish an infrastructure, it is a simple click. I mean, if you know the concept of the topic, you actually can prepare, you can implement everything in a web service, in a website. You can manage everything in a simple website where you can implement whatever the infrastructure you want. So that's the easiest management which you can do if you use this cloud computing. This is all the benefits that you can achieve if you basically use this cloud computing. So this is something with respect to this cloud computing benefits. And then if you can look at this cloud services types, what exactly the cloud services types? So I was actually talking about this infrastructure and so on, but what exactly the infrastructure as a service, and what exactly the platform as a service, what exactly the software as a service. When you look at here, the infrastructure as a service, the cloud will actually provide three kind of services. They are infrastructure as a service, and the other one platform as a service, and software as a service. What exactly the infrastructure as a service? So let me just quickly give you a simple example. So you have in the X company, right? You are already working in a company, and there are lots of Office VMs available, Office desktops, right? Let's say there are almost 10,000 of VMs, 10,000 of Office desktops that everybody uses. So they're all actually connected to each other. They're all connected to each other. They're all the systems connected to each other. And also you are able to send the files. You are able to share the files with each other. And also the user who can log in into this particular system, he cannot basically access the same, same file in here. So you have the security also in place. And also the person who can log in into this system, he can also log into any other system. And also there are also other servers who actually maintain all these systems. It means that whenever there is an upgrade which is happening, the upgrade is also happening. And whenever you want to implement the network security communication, you're also implementing them. You want to protect your networking solutions for your systems which are connected. You are also implementing. This is all actually called as infrastructure. So this is also basically called on-premises infrastructure. So now this infrastructure you can simply implement in the cloud. So that is basically called infrastructure services. Excuse me. So whatever you have in your on-premises, that the way that you have implemented, the same thing you can implement the infrastructure in the cloud. So it means that you are able to get the service for the infrastructure to build the way you have built in your on-premises. So that is the reason why this is actually called infrastructure as a service. So what cloud providers are actually doing, the cloud providers are actually giving some services in order to build your infrastructure. So that is the reason why this is actually called as infrastructure as a service. And then you also have, let's say, a platform as a service. So platform as a service. So what exactly this platform as a service? For example, let's say what you have, let's say you are the user. Okay, you are the user. And what you want to do, you want to make use some Tomcat server. What you want to do, you want to make use some Tomcat server. Then when you want to make use your Tomcat server, what you have to do, you have to take a VM. You have to take a VM server. And then you also have to install this Tomcat server in here. And when you want to install this Tomcat server, you also have to maintain the license for this Tomcat server software to use. And also for this VM server, let's say you need a 16 GB of RAM or 1 TB of storage, and let's say 10 CPU processor. Okay, so what you're doing, you are basically having a platform. You are basically having a platform with a configuration of 16 GB of RAM, 1 TB of storage, and 10 CPUs, and also software, which is a Tomcat server with a license. So now let's say in order to basically have this Tomcat server, then you need to maintain all yourself. But let's say what cloud people will say that I will give you everything. I will give you everything. So the Tomcat server is already available. You simply access this. You simply access this and use as long as you want. Once you don't want, then don't use it. And pay for the uses that you did. So now what I would say, you also have the infrastructure here. It means you also have the VM with the right configuration of the RAM, CPU, and processors. And also you have the software with the license. Everything is actually given as a service. So that is the reason why it is actually called PaaS, Platform as a Service. So you can also say what is exactly this PaaS. PaaS is nothing but infrastructure as a service plus software as a service. Software as a service. What is a software as a service? Because you are getting even Tomcat server also. If you are getting Tomcat server, what you are getting even the license also. So it means you also have the infrastructure. It means you have the VM, you have the CPU, you have the RAM and everything, infrastructure, and also you have got the software, the Tomcat server with license. So that is the reason why this is actually called PaaS, Platform as a Service. So a PaaS you can define as infrastructure as a service plus software as a service. You are also getting the software from this particular platform as a service. So now you should be able to understand what is the software as a service. Simply, if you basically get a software to use, then that is basically called software as a service. A simple example I would tell you, for example, let's say you are a user. You are a user, and then you have this Microsoft 365 Outlook for the mail communications, and MS Word and MS Excel. Let's say this is all Microsoft 365, which contains all these softwares. So let's say you want to use this Microsoft 365 in order to use MS Word, MS Excel, whatever. Then you want to use it for 1 month. What you want to do? You want to use it for 1 month. Then that is basically called a software as a service. What you want to do? You want to use this software for just only 30 days, and then thereafter you don't need it. So you will only pay for 30 days of the software as a service. Thereafter you don't pay. That is basically a software as a service. So this is something that what you actually can get from the cloud providers. So the cloud providers basically will provide you all the services with respect to what you need, really. You can just use as long as you want, and thereafter you don't need, then just cancel your termination, cancel your contract. That's it. So this is with respect to the demo that we have today. But tomorrow also there would be 2 more demos till Friday. Yeah. And before I end up the session, so what I do, I simply explain the syllabus that we are going to cover. So you can see here, we are going to basically discuss the introduction of the Azure, and in terms of the virtualization and cloud computing and so on. And also we are going to talk about, this Azure compute resources, creating, VMs and maintaining the disk and encrypting the disk and maintaining the app services and creating them and so on. These are all actually discussed as a part of this deploy and manage Azure compute resources. And then you can also basically create on-demand storage. So how do you create the storages, and then how can you implement the security, and how can you implement the access policies and so on. This is all with respect to the maintenance of storage from the Azure cloud. And also you would basically implement some kind of monitoring for your resources. So we will see the step by step that how you can implement monitoring of your application and the infrastructure and so on. And also we will see that how you can basically create your virtual network, the infrastructure as a code, and then maintain, with different kind of services we have from the Azure. And then we will also see that how you can maintain, Azure identity in terms of creating users and, restricting the users and so on from this managed Azure identities. And then Azure backup. So how do you really take the backups of the Azure services which you have already implemented, and how do you do that? These also can be discussed. And then this ARM templates deployment into this Azure cloud. So this is basically the syllabus that we are actually going to discuss, and we are going to discuss step by step. And also the training duration basically lasts for 30 days to 45 days. And the fee is 12,500. And apart from this, you also get the videos, the recorded videos for 1 year. You have an access to recorded videos for 1 year through the Ashok IT portal. And then you can also get the material, the day by day, as we basically finish, the topics. So we already have the material in place. So you will also get the material on daily topics that we are going to discuss. These are all the syllabus topics that we are actually going to cover as a part of this Azure cloud administration. So as I said, there will be 2 more demos, and you are free to attend, and then you can basically, decide based on that. And this is a time for you guys to ask me if you have any questions. Naga Prasad, can you please clarify virtual machines and remote desktops are same? Not really. So if you can see, you don't mix up these things. Remote desktops are not actually, they're really 2 things. When you have basically created a virtual machine and you remotely access that, so that is, you can actually call it, you are accessing a virtual machine remotely from the cloud. They are not actually comparable at all. They are really 2 things. There are 2 things. There are 2 different things. They are not really, comparable at all. Your voice is breaking. Santan, I don't know. I did not see that. Somebody might have told me that my voice was breaking. I'm sorry for that. I hope now it is fine. But you can ask me if you have any questions now.
So can we go for Azure certifications after this course?
Yes, you can go for 104 certification for sure. So we will actually cover these topics. So I can also give you these topics to you. They will be listed in the Azure certification. Yeah.
104. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, can we compare this AWS and Azure or GCP?
So the point is, if you basically learn these topics, and only the naming conventions will change, but apart from the naming conventions, everything will be the same. So for example, if you create VNet in the Azure, you will be calling as VPC there. So the topic is basically the same, but only the naming conventions will change.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions,
I
guys?
have I have one more doubt.
Yes.
You said virtual machines are there in on premises, right? Or
Yes.
it can be in any location.
See, the only thing why I call them as virtual machines, because if I basically talk about your office desktops and so on, you may not be the people who did not really work. So they may not be really understand. That is the reason why I said virtual machines. So you call them as office desktops, or you call them, office workstations and whatever you call. So in the from the cloud naming convention, we call them as virtual machines. That is the reason why I call them as virtual machines. Otherwise, you can call anyway. So that's okay. Any other questions, guys? Any other questions?
So can we use Mac for this course?
I'm sorry, your voice is pretty much low, Prasad.
Yeah, sorry. Can we use Mac for this course?
Still, your voice is pretty much low.
Okay.
Can you type in?
Yeah.
Can we use Mac for this course? Yes, of course, because everything we are actually managing in the web portal. So it does not matter whether you have Mac or Windows. So everything you manage via internet in the web portal. So we can use any system. So any other questions, guys? Okay, so I guess if you don't have any questions, we can continue even next two classes also. So you are free to attend and then we can meet tomorrow. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. See you then. Bye.
Bye, sir.